Now I have come back is to report to the British and French governments the result of my mission. And until I have done that, it would be difficult for me to say anything about it. I will only say this. I trust that all concerned will continue their efforts to solve the Czechoslovak problem peacefully, because on that turns the peace of Europe in our time.
On the 29th of September 1938, the Munich Conference was called. Here, Hitler met with representatives of the heads of state from France, the United Kingdom, and Italy. An agreement was reached that Hitler could annex the Sudetenland, provided he promised not to invade anywhere else. All four countries signed the agreement: Hitler, Neville Chamberlain, British Prime Minister, Edward Daladier of France, and Benito Mussolini. This famous photo from the Munich Conference is that of Neville Chamberlain, holding up a scrap of paper and claiming to have secured peace in our time. The Sudetenland was occupied by Germany between October the 1st and the 10th. Germany then broke the agreement by subsequently invading and annexing the whole of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. Not everyone welcomed the invasion.
In this 8mm film from 1939 or 1940, Peter and Nina Lederer and their younger cousin pick flowers in a field in Czechoslovakia. Their father, Robert, later died in a labor camp in Oranienburg. Rose and the children were sent to Theresienstadt. While there, Nina painted a watercolor that would later appear in the book, I Never Saw Another Butterfly. Nina, Peter, and their mother were deported to their deaths in Auschwitz in May 1944. Blanca Heller, Rose's younger sister, survived the Holocaust and retrieved these home movies from an acquaintance who had safeguarded the family's possessions. Hanna Fuchs, with the tennis racket, and her brother Jerzy came from Prague. Their father, Oskar, worked as a chemist and CEO of a major food corporation. Here, the Fuchs vacation at a beach in the Sudetenland. This is Jerzy and his father, Oskar. The Fuchs family was deported to Theresienstadt during the war. Oskar was appointed head of the economic police in the ghetto, and he oversaw the distribution of food. Only Hanna and Jerzy survived.
In 1942, the Nazis decided to liquidate the communal and private Jewish property in towns, including all of the contents of synagogues. Dr. Carol Stein of the Jewish community in Prague wrote to all Jewish communities, instructing them to send the contents of their synagogues to the Jewish Museum in Prague. The inventory of the Prague Jewish Museum expanded 14 times as a result of the large number of artifacts, Judaica, Torah scrolls, books that were sent to the museum. It needed over 40 warehouses, many of them deserted Prague synagogues, to store all these treasures. Joseph Polak, a lawyer by profession but a professional museologist and art historian by choice. In 1942, he was appointed to take charge of cataloguing the incoming mass of artifacts by the Prague Jewish community. He created the scientific program of the museum, set up the card index system, and established the meticulous rules and procedures that ensured consistency even as members of the museum staff were being deported and replaced. Dr. Tobias Jakubowicz, the former librarian of the Prague Jewish community, he became the scientific head of the Central Jewish Museum in Prague, and he co-curated the wartime exhibition of Hebrew manuscripts, prints, and books. František Zelenka, an architect and noted theatrical and costume designer. He found refuge with the Prague Jewish community at the beginning of the war, where he took care of many of its buildings and historical sites. Later, he was recruited to help implement the plan of creating a museum once the stream of artifacts began to arrive in Prague. Hanna Volavkova, an art historian and librarian. She joined the museum's team in the spring of 1943. Together with Joseph Polak, worked on an exhibition on the history of the Jews of Bohemia and Moravia. She was deported to Theresienstadt and in the end was the only survivor of the 5. the spring of 1945, just as World War II ended, the Soviet Red Army entered Prague and took over Czechoslovakia. In late February in 1948, the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, with Soviet backing, assumed undisputed control over the government of Czechoslovakia, making the onset of 4 decades of communist rule in the country. Eric Esterick, born in Brooklyn, he became an art gallery owner in London, and in the 1960s made frequent trips to Eastern Europe, including Prague. On one such trip in 1963, he met with officials from Artia, the state corporation responsible for art and cultural properties. The officials surprised Esterick with news about an old synagogue just outside Prague, where he was told there were Torah scrolls that they wanted to sell. Esterick was taken to the Mishli synagogue. When opening the door, he was absolutely stunned by the floor-to-ceiling array of Torah scrolls in disrepair. The Czechs told Esterick they would like to sell the scrolls, but emphasized the buyer must be willing to purchase the entire collection. But first, Shimon Abramsky, who was to become Professor of Hebrew Studies at the University of London, was asked to go to Prague for 12 days in November 1963 to examine the scrolls and to report on their authenticity and condition. While examining the scrolls, tattered, torn, a note fell out from one of them. It had been hidden by a Torah scribe in 1940. The prayerful message asked, what would happen to the Jews trying to survive these troubling times? Abramsky said, it was quite incredible to see this. I burst into tears. While Abramsky was still in Prague, Esterick discussed the problem of the Czech scrolls with Ralph Yablon, a philanthropist and a public-spirited member of London's Westminster Synagogue. Yablon agreed to purchase all 1,564 scrolls at a cost of around $20,000.
They crossed Europe in 2 large flatbed lorries, and on a very wet, miserable day in February, rather like today, these 2 lorries turned into the little turning where the synagogue is, Rutland Gardens, opposite Hyde Park, bearing their precious load of 1,564 scrolls of the law. And there, as if they were wearing shrouds, they looked like dead bodies. It was a very moving occasion, and most of the people there were in tears. There were many commemorative notes in them. One of them was tied up with a child's belt, and they were damaged. They were damaged by fire, by water, we think by blood. By tradition, a scroll cannot be used in a synagogue service if it is damaged in any way. And also traditionally, it is accepted by Orthodox Jews that damaged scrolls should be buried.
In a sense, they were brought back to life. I mean, these are the only survivors of these Czech communities. The people in them all perished. Hardly anybody survived the war, and the communities were certainly not re-established.
On one memorable day, there was a knock at the front door of the synagogue, and standing there when we opened the door was an Orthodox Jew. And he said to the lady who opened the door, "Do you by any chance have any scrolls for repair?" He was a professional scribe, a sofer, and she said to him, "We have 1,564, do come in."